Alright guys, turn to the page that was listed on the instructions. Write your date in the corner. In the other corner, you're going to write your TEK 5.2a. Your title is decimal place value. You're going to cut the pieces out and glue them so it matches this. Over here on the left hand side, you're just going to put a fine line of glue behind the colored part right here and make it a flap so that it'll open up like this. And this one will glue just flat in. So pause it here and get all that glued in. Alright, we're going to be talking about decimal place value. Okay, decimals name wholes and parts of a whole. So you've got your whole right here. And I want you to think about it whenever you've used the place value blocks when you first started learning about place value. We're looking at one whole unit. So we're looking at one of these cubes right here. So right below your ones, you're going to write ones. This is one whole unit. 1 is equal to 1 and 0 tenths, and is equal to 1 and 0 hundredths. We're going to start breaking this whole down into decimal places. So I want you to think about breaking this into 10 equal pieces, which would be like taking your dollar and breaking it into 10 dimes. So we're going to break this whole into 10 equal pieces. So since it's going to get smaller, we're not going to go to the left like we would if we had stacked up 10 of these to make a 10 rod. So we're going to go to the right. We're going to put a decimal to show that we've broken this up. Okay, this decimal is showing us that there are no longer a whole pieces. We're talking about parts of it. Okay, so this is the tenths place. We've broken it into 10 equal pieces. Okay, right here, the decimal, when you read this and you say the number in word form, which we'll talk about in a little bit, we're going to use the word and. We're on tenths. We're looking at one piece out of 10 pieces, so you could think of it as a fraction of 1 out of 10, which you would say that fraction the same way. You would say 1/10. And that is equal to writing a 0, a decimal, and a 1. And you would write it in word form 1/10. So now we're going to break it down even further. We're going to break it into the hundredths, which would be like taking that same dollar and breaking it into pennies. You have 100 of them. Okay, you're going to color in one little block. And we're talking about one of them. So 1 out of 100 pieces, or 1 out of 100. You would say that fraction 1/100th the same way you would write it, or the same way you would say it if it were in decimal. You'd write 0.01, and that is 1/100th. The fun part of this, when we get to decimals, guys, is saying that puff at the end and trying not to spit all over each other or our papers. It's tons of fun. So pause it right here and be sure you have all of that copied down. And just like with regular place value, we've got some different forms that we can use. We have standard form, which is just the normal way to write it. It's in its uniform, it's standard attire, just like you wear every day. We can do it in its word form, and that's where that decimal comes into place as saying the word and, like I was talking about before. So you would read this 2 and you just look at this section of the number and pretend nothing else is there for a minute, and it looks like 517. Okay, so then you go back and say, oh, okay, it is in a decimal. So we have 2 and, that's the decimal, 517, and you look at where the last number is, and it's in the thousandths place. So that's if we had taken these hundredths and broken it down even further. Then we have expanded form. Okay, and that's just like before with regular place value where we would write out each number in its own place value spot as an addition sentence. So we have 2 plus 5/10 plus 100th plus 7 thousandths. And then these right here are actually equivalent. And just like it sounds, equivalent, it means that they're equal. Okay, you can write 5/10 as 500ths or 500 thousandths or 50 hundredths. Same thing for our 100th. You can write it as 100th, 10 thousandths, or just the regular standard way. The thing you have to be careful about is not forgetting the zeros that go in front. These two are not equivalent. Same thing for right here. With 700 or 7 thousandths, you have to have those two zeros showing that it's all the way in the thousandths place. If you put it right next to the decimal, that's 7/10. That's not equivalent. If you only put 1 0, that's 7/100. That's not equivalent. And the way we wrote it earlier, you can also write it as fractions. You can write 5/10 as 5/10 or 5/10. You can write 100th as 1/100. And you can write 7 thousandths as 7/1000. Pause the video here and be sure you get everything copied down. So over on the left-hand side where you glued in this place value chart, we're going to write in our number. We had 2 wholes, 5/10, 100th, and 7 thousandths. Now it gets a little confusing when you're trying to remember the decimals and their period over here. So if you think about the decimal marking it as the whole number, and you're in one place value there, you've got a 10. If you put a 1 marking where the decimal is and go put zeros out to where the 1 is right here, you have the number 100, and that's the hundredths. And then in the last one, if you put a 1 there and put zeros marking out all the way until the 7, you end up with 1,000, or being in the thousandths place. So go ahead and be sure you've copied all of this down. We're going to be building on it some more tomorrow. And have a good night.